Hey Reddit, let me set the scene for you. My name's Adam, I'm 37, and I've been married to Emma for 10 years. Our life together has been what you'd call picture perfect. A cozy suburban home, 2 adorable kids, and a golden retriever named Max. Emma is a gym fanatic. About a year ago, she got really into fitness and signed up at a boutique gym downtown. At first, I was thrilled. She seemed happier, more confident, and frankly, the results were undeniable. She looked amazing. I even joked that she was making me look bad with my dad bod. Every evening, like clockwork, she'd head off to the gym after dinner. She'd return about 2 hours later, usually flushed and energized, chatting about her new routines and how tough her trainer, Ben, was on her. Ben this, Ben that, it was all harmless, I thought. I wasn't the gym type, so I figured it was natural for her to bond with her trainer. But lately, something's been off. Emma's phone has become a permanent fixture in her hand. She laughs at texts she doesn't show me and always tilts the screen away when I'm nearby. She's been unusually secretive, even hiding her phone under her pillow at night. I brushed it off as a phase. Maybe she needed space. Then came the incident. About 2 weeks ago, I stopped by the gym to drop off a water bottle she'd forgotten. It was one of those impulsive husband gestures that would usually earn me brownie points. But when I walked in, she wasn't in her usual spot near the weights. The receptionist seemed nervous when I asked for her and quickly said, "She's probably in the back, stretching." I didn't press further. Stretching, right? Cool. Still, my gut told me something didn't add up. She'd been talking about how hard she was training, but her gear was almost spotless when she came home, and there wasn't the faintest whiff of sweat on her. I chalked it up to paranoia. Why would my loving wife lie to me? That brings us to today. I was cleaning out the car when I found a crumpled receipt from a hotel downtown, dated from one of her late gym nights. My stomach dropped. I haven't confronted her about it yet. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ready to. And here's the kicker. This afternoon, some guy showed up at my office asking to talk. Said his name was Eric, and that we needed to discuss something urgent about Emma. What the hell does that mean? I didn't know what to expect when Eric showed up at my office. Who just walks in unannounced to talk about your wife? My mind was racing, but I kept my cool. He was tall, mid-30s, and had the demeanor of someone who wasn't here to waste time. He introduced himself quickly, a curt Eric Winters, before sitting down across from me. "Adam, I know this is going to sound strange, but I need you to hear me out," he began, leaning forward. "This is about your wife and my partner." His words hit me like a freight train. Partner? I couldn't decide if he meant a romantic partner or just a workout buddy. But either way, the implication was clear. This wasn't good. I don't mean to be blunt, but my girlfriend, Sarah, is Ben's fiancée. And over the past few weeks, I've noticed some things, irregularities, you might say. I blinked, my mind struggling to catch up. Wait, Ben? As in my wife's gym trainer, Ben. Eric nodded solemnly. Yeah, that Ben. My heart started pounding, but I refused to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to give away that my own suspicions were already brewing. What are you saying exactly? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Eric sighed, pulling out his phone. Sarah's been acting strange lately. Secretive, constantly texting, and always on edge when I'm around. I thought it was just stress. But then I started noticing her mentioning Emma's name a lot. Too much. I'm not one to snoop, but I checked her messages. He paused, and his eyes met mine. Let's just say the conversations between your wife and my fiancé aren't what 2 married people should be having. I felt like the ground beneath me was collapsing. You're sure about this? I asked, my voice shaking slightly despite my efforts to stay composed. Eric nodded again. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Look, I get it, this is a lot to take in. But I thought you deserved to know. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. Why come to me? Why not confront Ben or, I don't know, Sarah? Because I want answers, Eric said firmly. And if what I think is true, you do too. I don't want to blow up our lives without solid proof. I figured the 2 of us might be able to piece this together. I stared at him, my mind a storm of emotions. Betrayal, confusion, anger. They were all there, jostling for attention. But above all, one question loomed large. Was Emma capable of doing this to me? Eric slid his phone across the desk. On the screen were screenshots of text messages. I hesitated before picking it up. The first few messages were innocuous, but then came phrases like, "Can't wait to see you tonight," and "I wish we didn't have to hide this." My stomach churned. Eric spoke up, breaking the silence. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it doesn't look good." He was right, didn't. "I need time to think," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. Eric nodded, standing to leave. "If you decide you want to dig deeper, let me know," he said, handing me a card with his number. "I don't want to do this alone." After he left, I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at those messages. My mind kept screaming that this wasn't real, that there had to be an explanation. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. The receipt in the car, the clean gym clothes. Now this? I didn't know what my next move was, but one thing was certain. My marriage might not be as perfect as I thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Emma snoozed peacefully beside me. How could she look so serene when my world was imploding? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eric's face, his phone screen, and those damning messages. By morning, I had decided. If Emma was hiding something, I needed proof before making accusations. It wasn't just about her anymore. We had kids, a home, a life built on trust, or so I thought. I wasn't about to let it all crumble without certainty. At breakfast, Emma was her usual self. Light-hearted and chatty, flipping pancakes while our kids argued over syrup. It felt surreal, watching her laugh and joke like nothing was wrong. "I'm hitting the gym tonight," she said casually as she poured coffee into my mug. "Ben's got a new routine he wants me to try. Should be brutal." The mention of his name sent a flash of anger through me, but I forced a smile. "Sounds intense. Make sure you don't overdo it." "Oh, I'll be fine," she replied, brushing it off. "Ben knows my limits." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, her smile faltering for a split second before she quickly swiped it away. "Everything okay?" I asked, pretending not to notice. "Yeah, just a group chat from the gym," she said, too casually. It was a lie. I didn't have proof, but I felt it in my gut. After she left for work, I decided to act. If Eric was serious about teaming up, I needed his help. I called him, my voice steady despite the unease churning in my stomach. "I'm in," I said simply. "Good," Eric replied. "I've been thinking about how we can get concrete evidence. Do you have access to Emma's phone or her gym schedule?" I hesitated. I didn't like the idea of snooping, it felt wrong. But what choice did I have? "I can probably figure something out," I said. "But it's going to take some time." Eric was quiet for a moment before speaking. "I have an idea. Meet me tonight after she leaves for the gym. We'll stake it out." The plan sounded crazy, like something out of a bad detective movie, but I agreed. That evening, Emma left for her usual gym session, kissing me goodbye and reminding me to lock the front door. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. Eric was waiting for me in his car near the gym. He'd parked strategically, with a clear view of the entrance. I climbed into the passenger seat, and he handed me a coffee. "Here's the plan," he said, pointing toward the building. "We'll wait for her to go inside. If she leaves early or with Ben, we follow." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "And if nothing happens? Then we keep digging," Eric said grimly. We sat in silence, watching the gym's entrance. Time crawled by, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Emma's car pulled into the lot. She stepped out in her gym clothes, looking every bit the dedicated fitness enthusiast. "She's here," I muttered. Eric nodded, but something felt off. Instead of heading inside, Emma lingered by her car, glancing around nervously. Moments later, another car pulled up, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped as Ben stepped out. Emma's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. They didn't head into the gym. Instead, they got into his car and drove off. Eric and I exchanged a look. No words needed. I barely managed to whisper, "Follow them." The chase was on, and with it, the first crack in the door to the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. Eric's car blended into traffic effortlessly as we tailed Ben's sedan. My pulse thundered in my ears, each turn heightening the tension. It wasn't like Emma to be careless. She'd always been meticulous. So why was she making moves that were so easy to follow? The city lights blurred as we drove in silence. Eric's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, and my stomach churned. I couldn't shake the image of Emma's face when Ben pulled up. The way her smile wasn't just warm, but glowing. "Where do you think they're going?" I finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. "No idea," Eric replied grimly. "But it's not the gym, that's for sure." We followed them through side streets and intersections until they reached a quieter part of town. Ben's car finally slowed, pulling into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. My heart sank. The sign was subtle, almost understated. The Haven Suites. Not a place for casual meetings or post-workout cooldowns. This was a hotel meant for privacy. "They're not even trying to hide it," Eric muttered, parking a safe distance away. I clenched my fists, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, it felt like the confirmation I dreaded. On the other, I still couldn't believe Emma would do this. "We can't just sit here," I said. "We need to know what's going on." Eric nodded. "I'll handle it. Wait here." Before I could stop him, he got out of the car, straightening his jacket as if preparing for a business meeting. He disappeared into the hotel lobby, leaving me alone with my spiraling thoughts. Minutes passed, each one dragging like an hour. I fought the urge to storm into the building myself, but Eric had a calmness about him I lacked. If anyone could handle this tactfully, it was him. Finally, he returned, sliding into the driver's seat with a grim expression. "They checked in under Ben's name," he said, his voice tight. "Room 213. The words hit me like a slap. "What now?" I asked, barely keeping my composure. Eric took a deep breath. "We don't confront them, not yet. I know someone who can help us get proof without making a scene." "A private investigator?" He nodded. "He's discreet and quick. If they've been doing this for a while, we need more than just one incident. We need a pattern." I hated the idea of waiting, of letting them carry on while we gathered evidence. But Eric was right. Charging in without a plan wouldn't get us anywhere. Reluctantly, I agreed. "Fine, but we need to move fast. I can't live like this for long." Eric's face softened, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I get it. Trust me, Adam. We'll figure this out." As we drove back home, I stared out the window, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. When I finally walked through my front door, the house was dark and quiet. Emma wouldn't be back for another hour, at least. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, torn between calling her and pretending this night never happened. But deep down, I knew the cracks in our marriage weren't going to fix themselves. The only question was how much further they would spread before everything fell apart, and whether I'd be ready when it did. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Emma had left early, texting me something about a meeting with a client. I stared at the message longer than I should have, trying to decide if her tone felt off. Was I reading too much into it? Or not enough? Eric called mid-morning, his voice clipped and professional. "I spoke to the investigator. He's in. He'll need a few days to set up surveillance, but he'll start tracking them immediately." "Good," I replied, though the word felt hollow. The thought of someone documenting Emma's every move made me nauseous. But what other choice did I have? "Listen," Eric continued. "I know this is hard, but we need to play it smart. No confrontations, no tipping them off. Just go about your day like nothing's changed." Easier said than done. After we hung up, I tried to lose myself in work, but every little noise from Emma's phone, which she'd left charging in the kitchen, drew my attention. It was locked, of course, and while I'd never considered invading her privacy before, today was different. Before I could second-guess myself, I picked it up. My hands were shaking as I swiped up on the screen. Passcode. Figures. I tried her birthday. Nothing. The kids' birthdays. Still nothing. A knot formed in my stomach. How many passcodes did she need? Then it hit me. I typed in Ben's initials and birth year. Something she'd mentioned in passing when talking about her amazing trainer. The screen unlocked. My heart sank. There were messages. So many messages. The most recent one, from Ben, read, "Tonight, same place? Can't stop thinking about you." Felt like a punch to the gut. My head spun as I scrolled through their conversations. There was nothing explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. Inside jokes, late-night texts, and vague references to meetings that clearly weren't about fitness. I couldn't read anymore. I put the phone back where I found it, my mind reeling. When Emma came home that evening, she was all smiles, acting like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, ruffled the kids' hair, and started making dinner as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. I sat at the table watching her closely. "How was work?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Good," she replied breezily. "Busy but good. How about you?" "Same," I said, forcing a smile. "The usual grind." Her phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw her glance at it out of the corner of her eye. She didn't pick it up right away, but I caught the faintest flicker of nervousness in her expression. Later that night, while she showered, I called Eric. "I got into her phone," I said quietly, my voice heavy. "It's bad, Eric. They're definitely seeing each other." There was a pause on the other end before Eric responded. "I'm sorry, man, but this is good. It means we're getting closer to the truth." Closer to the truth. That's all I wanted, or so I thought. But as I lay awake in bed that night, listening to Emma's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't help but wonder. When the truth finally came out, would it destroy me, or would it set me free? The next evening, Eric and I found ourselves back in his car, parked near the Haven Suites. The investigator, a no-nonsense guy named Derek, had already been briefed and was tailing Ben and Emma. Tonight, we decided to see for ourselves if there was anything else to uncover. Eric tapped the steering wheel rhythmically, his jaw tight. "I don't know how you're holding it together," he said, breaking the silence. "I'm not," I admitted. "I'm just waiting." "For what?" "I don't even know." "Closure," Eric replied. "We both need it." A tense quiet settled over the car as we watched the hotel entrance. My heart raced every time the doors opened, even though I knew it was too early for them to show up. Just when I thought I couldn't take the waiting anymore, a familiar car pulled into the lot. It was Emma's. "There she is," I muttered, leaning forward. Emma stepped out, wearing casual clothes but with an unmistakable effort to look her best. She glanced around the parking lot, then walked inside. Not long after, Ben's sleek black sedan pulled in. He parked near the entrance and strode inside without hesitation. Eric swore under his breath. There's no denying it now. My stomach churned as I watched them disappear into the building. A part of me wanted to rush in, to demand answers, but I knew that would only make things worse. "Derek's in position," Eric said, checking his phone. "He'll get what we need." We waited in the car, the minutes dragging like hours. The tension was suffocating, and my mind raced with every worst-case scenario. After what felt like an eternity, Eric's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's Derek. He says they're not in a room." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "They're in the hotel restaurant, having dinner." I blinked, my emotions swinging wildly between anger and confusion. Dinner? After sneaking around together, they had the nerve to casually dine in public? Eric started the car. "Let's see this for ourselves." We parked a few blocks away and walked to the hotel, our movements cautious. Inside, the restaurant was dimly lit, with a romantic ambience that set my blood boiling. Sure enough, there they were, Emma and Ben, sitting at a corner table, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I clenched my fists, feeling the urge to storm over. But Eric grabbed my arm. "Not here," he hissed. "Let's keep it quiet." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. We snapped a few discreet photos from a distance before slipping out. Back in the car, I felt like I was going to explode. What the hell was that? They're flaunting this like it's nothing. Eric looked just as furious. They're getting comfortable, arrogant even, but that works in our favor. It makes them sloppy. Sloppy doesn't make this hurt any less, I muttered. Eric was quiet for a moment. You're right, but now we know. And now we fight smart. As he drove me home, I couldn't shake the image of Emma laughing with Ben. Like everything was perfectly normal. I wasn't sure what hurt more. The betrayal itself, or the realization that I'd been blind to it for so long. The following morning, Derek called with an update. I've gathered enough evidence for a clear timeline, he said, his voice steady. Multiple meetups, phone records, and pictures from last night. It's irrefutable. Hearing those words didn't bring the relief I'd hoped for. Instead, a sense of dread settled over me. This was it, the truth, raw and undeniable. There was no more space for doubt or excuses. I'll send everything over today, Derek continued. You'll have it by this evening. I thanked him, though my voice felt detached. After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the table where Emma and I shared countless meals, conversations, and moments of laughter. It all felt hollow now, like I was living in a stranger's life. That evening, Emma came home with her usual cheerful demeanor. She kissed me on the cheek, set her bag down, and started telling me about her day. I barely heard her. My mind was consumed by the folder I'd received from Derek, now tucked away in my office. Adam, are you okay? She asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired. Long day. She nodded, though her eyes lingered on me a moment too long. Well, dinner's almost ready. Why don't you relax while I finish up? I muttered an excuse and went to my office, needing a moment to compose myself. I couldn't keep pretending. This charade was eating me alive. When dinner was over and the kids were in bed, I finally made my move. Emma, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked up from her phone, surprised by my tone. Sure. What's on your mind? I sat across from her at the dining table, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. Are you happy? I asked. The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? Of course I am. Why would you even ask that? I took a deep breath. Because lately it feels like something's off. You've been distant, secretive. I can't shake the feeling that there's something you're not telling me. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed herself. Adam, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been busy, sure, but nothing's wrong. Really? I said, my voice growing colder. Then tell me, Emma, how do you explain Ben? Her face paled. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, she laughed nervously. Ben? My trainer? What about him? I know, Emma, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know about the texts, the hotel, the dinners. I know everything. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mixture of panic and defiance. You've been spying on me? She snapped. I had to. I shot back. You weren't going to tell me, were you? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Tears welled in her eyes, and she buried her face in her hands. It's not what you think, she finally choked out. Then tell me what it is, I demanded, my anger rising. Because right now, it looks like you've been lying to me for months. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. It's complicated, Adam. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to us? To our family? Emma was silent, her eyes filled with guilt. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from me. And for the first time, I didn't know if I even wanted to. Emma sat across from me, her face pale, her hands trembling. It wasn't supposed to get this far, she whispered, barely meeting my eyes. Then why did it? I demanded, my voice a mix of anger and desperation. Help me understand, Emma, Because right now I can't. She sighed, wiping at her tears with shaky hands. It started innocently. I swear it did. Ben was just my trainer. At first, all we talked about was fitness, workouts, meal plans, that sort of thing. But he listened to me in a way I didn't even realize I was craving. He made me feel seen. I leaned back, my chest tightening. Seen? Emma, I've been here. Every day. I see you. Our family sees you. How could that not be enough? It's not about you, she said quickly, her voice cracking. You're a great husband, Adam. A great father. But somewhere along the way, I felt like I lost myself. I didn't even know who I was anymore. And Ben, he made me feel like I mattered. Like I wasn't just a mom or a wife. Her words were daggers, each one slicing deeper than the last. So what? He said a few nice things, and you decided that was worth risking everything? Emma flinched, fresh tears streaming down her face. I didn't plan this, Adam. I didn't wake up one day and decide to betray you. It just happened. I stood, pacing the room, my fists clenched. Things like this don't just happen. You made choices, Emma. You lied to me, to our kids. You knew exactly what you were doing. She nodded, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her guilt. You're right, she admitted. I made choices, stupid, selfish choices. And now, I'm paying for them. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of her quiet sobs. Is it over? I asked finally, my voice quieter but no less intense. Emma hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer I needed. I felt my knees go weak, and I sank back into the chair. God, Emma, I wanted to end it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was going to tell him it was done, but I didn't know how. And then things kept spiraling, and I was too afraid to face you. Too afraid, I repeated bitterly. You weren't too afraid to sneak around, to go to hotels, to lie to my face. But facing the truth? That's where you drew the line. She didn't respond, her silence confirming every fear I'd been trying to suppress. At that moment, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Emma and I exchanged a look, both startled by the interruption. I'll get it, I said sharply, needing an excuse to step away before I said something I couldn't take back. I opened the door to find Eric standing there, his face grim. Eric? I asked, confused. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low. It's about Ben. My heart sank as Emma appeared behind me, her face paling at the sight of Eric. What's going on? She asked nervously. Eric ignored her, his eyes locked on mine. Adam, I didn't want to bring this up before, but I think there's more to this than just an affair. What do you mean? I asked, my stomach nodding. Ben's not who he says he is, Eric said firmly. And I think your wife might be in more danger than either of us realized. The air grew heavy, the implications of his words hanging between us. Whatever I thought I knew, it was clear this was far from over. Danger, I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. What are you talking about, Eric? Emma stood frozen behind me, her face drained of color. This is ridiculous, she stammered. He's just my trainer. What danger could there possibly be? Eric gave her a hard look, his jaw tight. You don't know him like I do. What do you mean? I pressed, stepping out onto the porch with him. I didn't want to have this conversation in front of Emma. Not yet. Eric glanced over his shoulder before speaking in a low voice. I've been digging into Ben's past. He's got a record, Adam. Fraud, harassment, even restraining orders from some of his former clients. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're sure? I've seen the files, Eric said. He's a manipulator. He charms people, gets them to trust him, and then exploits that trust. I think Emma's just the latest in a long line of marks. I felt the ground beneath me shift. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something darker, something more sinister. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I demanded. I wanted to be certain, Eric admitted. And I didn't want to push you over the edge without proof. But after last night, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. What do we do now? We get Emma away from him, Eric said firmly. Whatever hold he has on her, we need to break it. But we have to be careful. Guys like Ben don't just walk away when things don't go their way. I nodded, my chest tightening as the weight of the situation settled over me. When I stepped back inside, Emma was waiting, her arms crossed defensively. What did he say? She demanded. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. He knows things about Ben, I said carefully. Things you need to hear. Emma shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. No, this is absurd. Ben isn't dangerous. He's not what you think. How well do you really know him, Emma? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Because according to Eric, he's been using you, manipulating you. This isn't just about an affair anymore. Her face crumpled, and she sank into the nearest chair. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I thought I knew him, but there were things he said, things he did that didn't sit right. I ignored them because I was stupid. I let myself believe in something that wasn't real. I crouched in front of her, my anger giving way to something closer to pity. Emma, listen to me. Whatever you thought this was, it's over now. You need to cut all ties with him. Do you understand? She nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever you want, Adam. Just, please don't hate me. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Eric stepped into the room, his expression grim. We need to move fast. If Ben catches wind that Emma's pulling away, things could escalate. How do we stop him? I asked. Eric's gaze hardened. We hit him where it hurts, his reputation. I've got enough dirt on him to make sure he can't pull this again. But we'll need Emma's help to seal the deal. Emma's eyes widened. You want me to go back to him? After everything? Not for long, Eric said. Just enough to get him to slip up. We'll record everything. And when it's over, he'll have no choice but to disappear. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one we had. As much as I hated the idea of Emma staying in contact with Ben, I hated the thought of him continuing his cycle of manipulation even more. Fine, I said. Let's do it. Emma looked terrified, but she nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. As the plan began to take shape, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into a minefield. Ben was dangerous, and we were about to light the fuse. The only question was whether we'd make it out before everything exploded. The plan went into motion the next day. Emma, though reluctant, reached out to Ben under the guise of continuing their relationship. Eric worked with Derek, the investigator, to plant recording devices and set up surveillance. Every step felt precarious, like walking a tightrope over a pit of snakes. The meeting was set for that evening at a park near the edge of town. Ben chose the spot, secluded, quiet. Felt like a trap, but we didn't have a choice. If we were going to stop him, we had to see it through. I stayed in the car with Eric, parked at a distance. Emma sat on a bench near a cluster of trees, nervously fiddling with her phone. A tiny recording device was hidden in her jacket. Ben arrived 10 minutes late, strolling up like he didn't have a care in the world. Even from a distance, I could see the smirk on his face. He sat beside Emma, leaning in close. Why do you look so nervous? Ben asked, his voice low but audible through the device's live feed. Emma forced a smile. I've just been thinking a lot about us. Ben's smirk widened. Oh yeah? What about us? Her hands trembled, but she kept going. I'm not sure this is a good idea anymore, with everything going on. Ben's expression darkened. What do you mean? After everything we've shared, you're just going to walk away? I don't want to hurt anyone, Emma said, her voice wavering. Too late for that, Ben snapped. You think you can just end this and go back to playing happy family? You owe me, Emma. My fists clenched as I listened, every fiber of my being wanting to rush over and drag him away. Eric grabbed my arm, shaking his head. Not yet, he muttered. Emma tried to reason with Ben, but his tone grew sharper. You don't get it, do you? If you think I'm going to let you leave me after all this, you're wrong. You'll regret it, Emma. And so will your precious husband. That was my breaking point. Before Eric could stop me, I threw open the car door and marched toward them. Ben's head snapped up as I approached, his face twisting into a sneer. Well, well, he said, standing. If it isn't the husband. Come to defend your little princess. Leave her alone, I growled, stepping between him and Emma. He chuckled, unfazed. You think you can scare me? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you, Eric said, appearing behind me. He held up his phone, playing back the recording of Ben's threats. We've got everything, Ben. The lies, the manipulation, the threats. It's over. For a moment, Ben's confidence wavered. Then his expression hardened. You think this scares me? Go ahead. Play your little recordings. You'll never prove anything. Eric stepped closer, his voice icy. We don't have to prove anything. All we need to do is send this to your current clients, your former clients, and the authorities. How long do you think it'll take before you're out of business? And out of lives to ruin? Ben glared at him, his jaw tightening. You're making a mistake. No, you did, I snapped. Now get out of here. And if I ever see you near my wife or family again, you'll wish you'd stayed away. Ben stood there for a moment, his fists clenched, before finally turning and stalking off. When he was gone, Emma collapsed onto the bench, sobbing. I stood there, torn between comforting her and walking away. Eric broke the silence. You did the right thing, Adam. Both of you. I nodded, though the weight of everything felt unbearable. In the days that followed, Eric and Derek ensured Ben's past caught up with him. His reputation was shattered, his client base vanished, and legal action was initiated by several of his former victims. As for Emma and me, the road ahead was less certain. She begged for forgiveness, swearing she'd do whatever it took to rebuild my trust. I agreed to counseling, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I owed it to our kids to try. Some days I feel like we can make it. Other days the betrayal feels too fresh, too deep. But one thing is clear. The truth, no matter how painful, is better than living a lie. And whatever happens next, I'll face it with my eyes wide open. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm finally stepping out of the shadows.